Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the weekly Mormon News Roundup. I'm your humble host, D-Base here, talent on loan from Kolob. I'm bringing you this podcast with half of the Kinderhook plates tied behind my back just to make things fair. My crew and I are going to ruminate with you weekly on the great and spacious beehive, so thanks so much for coming to join us to discuss the latest current events in Mormondom. This is November 19th, 2023, episode 86. Elder Melvin Ballard dies, and there's some new Tim Ballard Criminal Lawsuit, and there's much, much more. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm at Mormon News Roundup I'm at MormonNewsRoundup.org, or you can send me an email to Kolob@MormonNewsRoundup.org. I'd like to welcome onto the program my fabulous co-host, John Larsen. John, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing all right. I'm a little gravelly. I've been a little bit under the weather. I've had kind of a cough and cold. Tests say it's not COVID, but it's not years of smoking. It's the gravel. So thanks for humoring me.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. John, what is your 60-second Mormon story? Who are you? What are you all about?
Oh, I left the church some years ago and was rather upset about the whole thing and sort of made a stink. And then I kind of come onto the Mormon podcasting and broadcasting world from time to time. Currently, I do a monthly gig on Mormon stories. John DeLynne's whatever you want to call that thing. Yeah, that's me there ranting away in the basement. Between 2009 and 2014, I did a little podcast called Mormon Expression. It was hacked in 2015. We lost the original site, but Mormon Stories has graciously agreed to host it. And there it is, about 300 episodes of mayhem over a course of 5 years that we were responsible for. And before that, I would fight it out with apologists and others on the internet forums of the day, going back to about when the last time I went to church was 2005. In the fall of 2005 is when I finally gave up the ghost.
Well, thank you very much. Your Mormon Expressions podcast, listened to quite a few of those. I don't think I've gotten to all 300, but certainly have listened to so many of them. And also your Mormon Stories episodes, listen to all of those. Highly recommended. That does bring us to our Mormon News Roundup Joke of the Week, which I believe that you've got for us, right, John?
Yeah, Mormon jokes are kind of interesting. I've been thinking about it since you gave me that assignment a week or so ago. I would plumb the depths of my mind. Maybe this is not what you wanted, a big essay on the Mormon Joke of the Week. But I noticed that a lot of the jokes that I knew from when I was a Mormon were kind of cruel. They had a target. But I found one that's kind of a classic. There's many forms of this, and the joke goes something like this. The one I found was centered on Vietnam, so you can see how old it was. So a bunch of soldiers are down in the caisson, right? And they're exchanging fire with the VC, and a bullet comes and streams and hits Andrew in the chest, and he falls over, seemingly dead. And his fellow Marines there, they have to retreat under heavy fire and crawl back out of the jungle, and wondering what they're going to do with Andrew. And pretty soon, Andrew comes crawling through the underbrush, and they're like, "My God, what happened? Andrew, you're alive!" And Andrew reaches into his chest pocket there and pulls out a copy of the Book of Mormon and holds it up, and he says, "Nothing." And it's got a bullet in it. The Book of Mormon has a bullet in it. He says, nothing gets through Second Nephi.
That's an original. I think that's an original. I haven't heard that one before.
Well, I stole it from the internet.
Oh, that's okay. I really appreciate you being on here. Let's jump into the news. Now, I know, John, that you don't necessarily stay on the up and up on the latest church news stuff, but that's why this podcast is here, is for folks who need to stay up on church news. We're here for you, John. So our first article this week is the church has opened for the first time ever. Utah County is going to shelter the homeless overnight this winter in a community of churches. This is very inspiring stuff here, John. I was surprised to read that because, I lived in Utah County for a long time, taught at BYU for many, many years. And all of this consortium of churches is getting together to shelter the homeless overnight, which is really faith inspiring here. And I got this tweet here from Matthew Allen here, which I want to read out. It says, "I'm often a harsh critic of the Mormon church because my expectations are high. but I have to give them kudos for when they do good things. Using their buildings to ease human suffering is a good thing. And then he followed that up, John, here with right afterwards, oh, shit, never mind then. I figured out the predominant Christian church in this state would be included. I guess I should have actually read the article. My bad for having the lowest expectations for the institutional church. So all of these churches here in Utah County are banding together to fight homelessness and to ensure that people do not freeze to death, which unfortunately happens every year in Utah County, except for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's one of the only, it's the only major church and one of the only major churches that's not joining in. And as we know, Utah County does not really have a big homeless shelter for unsheltered persons there. The church is not participating in this one, John.
Well, you know, it's not surprising. I've always thought, even back when I was a member, you know, one of the biggest tragedies in the church is they build these big, beautiful buildings. Well, beautiful's kind of a stretch, you know. They're made of cinder block, just like prisons are. These big buildings that are, you know, highly functional. It could be these great community centers. And, you know, back in the 50s and 60s, the communities built them themselves. The church didn't have a building fund, so members got together and pooled their money, and they built the building. They had advisors from architects in the church, but it was locally owned. And if you go to those old churches, the ones that are still standing, they're fantastic buildings. They're not very wheelchair accessible or anything like that, but they're beautifully apportioned architecturally, many of them. And they were community centers. The church is set up by Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, and was the idea that we were all kind of in this together, right? We were building the kingdom of God. And, you know, they had kitchens, and they had stages, and they had plays, and they had all this kind of stuff. But, you know, I'm this is going to come up again before we're done with this hour. If you want to understand the church, you just have to understand that it's a corporation, right? And corporations don't give away anything for free. So what's happened since those churches were built and they were community centers is the church has slowly gutted all those programs. And the idea that the church would give away anything for free is the antithesis to what the church stands for, which is it's a corporation. You know, if you go into most churches, they'll have a nursery that they usually will rent out. You know, if you're like Catholic, they'll be running their own preschool. But a lot of churches just let that out and allow that church to be used during the week. Same thing in most churches, you can rent their areas for weddings and all sorts of stuff. But the Mormons, they like to keep those churches locked up tight.
Yeah, during the week, there's very little that happens, especially during the daytimes at most churches. They're generally only used a couple of nights of the week, and then on Sunday, maybe 10 hours a week of maximum usage. So it'd be nice if the church would get involved with these, you know, with these other organizations and, you know, help out, but it doesn't do it. And I guess the reason is because of insurance purposes. You'd have to have different insurance or pay more for insurance to be able to house people, unsheltered people during the week. But it seems like the church has enough resources that it would be able to pay for any additional insurance. So that's something that I wish that we could see. But this isn't the only building thing that we saw this week as well. The church also in Nauvoo here, John, Latter-day Saints find themselves in a new fight with their neighbors in Nauvoo. So it's time. This time it's over building plans, and this time some members are even at odds with one another. So, you know, the church rebuilt the Nauvoo temple back in 1995, I believe it was, under President Hinckley, after the Nauvoo temple was burned to the ground in, I think it was 1847 or so. But it's one of the few temples that hasn't had a visitor center, John. And the church has said, well, we need to have a historic visitor center for this property. The problem is that there's not a lot of space here for the proposed visitor center. The visitor center is going to be over here, and it's going to be blocking this church here, this which I believe is a Catholic church. And that's you know, Nauvoo is kind of a Catholic place now. It's not really a Mormon place. And the neighbors are saying, you know, we really don't want to have the visitor center that's going to be here, that's going to be blocking the Catholic church. Can you just please move it down the hill just a little bit more? And that's the problem, is that the church has said, well, we feel inspired about this particular location for the visitor center, and we don't want to move it. So, President Hinckley rebuilt in 2002. So that's what we're seeing here, is the church is trying to announce a new visitor center in Nauvoo, and they're upsetting all the neighbors because they want it to be in a particular location, in a particular place, and they're not playing nice with their neighbors. And that's causing quite a bit of controversy there.
Well, I'm gonna side with the church on this one. Nauvoo is a town. I just looked it up while you were talking. The population of Nauvoo, according to Nauvoo's official website, is 950 people. It's out in the middle of kind of nowhere. And if it wasn't for like Mormons streaming through there with their cash, the town would just be a couple of cow fields. You know, so if the citizenry wants to bite the hand that feeds it, I think they're just blustering a little bit. I mean, it's the church's town. Let's be honest. They own it. It's theirs. So if they want to build a visitor center, build a visitor center. That's my take.
Yeah, Peggy Fletcher Stack said everyone supports a visitor center for the LDS Nauvoo temple, but some locals object to the proposed location. They just say move it a few hundred feet to the west, and the city council is going to vote on this here just in a couple of days. So we've seen this happen before in the Cody, Wyoming temple, in the Heber Valley temple, where the church feels inspired about its particular buildings, about its temples, about its visitor centers. And then when they announce those into the community, they rarely compromise about the nature of those, about the locations, about the zoning and things like that. They generally just try to push these things through with very little debate. And it sounds like you're on the church's side, and that could be a first for the Mormon Expression.
I don't know if it's a first. I know a little bit more about Cody and the Heber one. You know, where the church gets in trouble all the time with the community is they want to build it high, and the church has not ever made any. They've never tried to mask the fact that they want it to be the most prominent building around. And I know for the Heber Valley one, you know, one of the big issues is the lights. They light those things up like with a lot of electricity, first of all, but just very bright floodlights. The neighbors don't know what they're bargaining for in that. And then, that might be an issue with the visitor center. I don't know all the ins and outs of what the city council and the people are arguing about. But, because of that, there's a certain feel of the community. Cody has that for sure. You know, it's got this feel of this old Western town. That's part of what is the appeal. It's part of what draws the visitors there. But what the church wants to do is they want to trump that and show that they're different and bigger. You know, Heber Valley has always been like, they joke that if you go up into Heber, up into the valley up there, you can see Salt Lake like glowing over the top of the mountains, right? Because of the light pollution, and they've always prided themselves on the fact that they're not as light as bright. It's a rural community, so this changes the very nature of the community. But I think what's interesting is that's exactly what the church wants. The church wants to be above the community. That's the message that they're sending. And when you talk about with Nauvoo, will they move it 150 feet? Again, I don't know the parameters, but that seems like a logical choice. But the church oftentimes digs in because the position they select is the most elevated one or whatever they're doing. So yeah, I think the criticism that the church is not paying attention to local community is a valid one.
Yeah, let me just try to play one more reel that goes along with this particular news article and get your reaction to this. We had Ryan Josiah, who runs a very popular TikTok account on the Mormon News Roundup on episode 81, but he talks about this proposed visitor center in Nauvoo.
I keep telling you about these cases where the LDS Church walks all over a community because they can, because it just keeps happening. First, we had Cody, Wyoming, where the church is getting their way in building a temple where they want it, how they want it, because of threats of lawsuits. And then there's the Heber Valley Temple, where the Wasatch County Council recently unanimously approved the building of the temple, despite it being hugely controversial in multiple ways still, because every single member of the council is Mormon. And now we have another one. At least this one's not a temple. No, it's the visitor center for a temple, the Nauvoo temple, actually, where the church is yet again getting their way, building a temple where they want it, despite objections in the community, people who actually live there, because the church feels strongly about its location. And they have money and lawyers. There are even members of the church fighting this visitor center location. Even temple workers fighting this location. But no, they feel strongly, so they're going to get their way. And the city doesn't have enough money to fight. When are they going to learn? The church knows they have a huge PR problem where lots of people really dislike them. And yet they keep doing the very same things that makes people really dislike them. You think switching from the word Mormon to the word Jesus and putting crosses on Google Maps is going to fix that?
Let me give you the last word on this, John. How about the last word on the church's PR? Like Ryan Josiah said, the church has a PR problem, and yet when they announce, all of these temples and all of these visitor centers and all of these communities, they end up stepping on a lot of, people, and we wonder why we haven't learned any lessons on how to build with communities. If you're in Nauvoo and you are the bill payer, yes, you have authority to do these things, but isn't there just a better way of possibly doing it?
I've been doing this for a long time, right? And I'm going to bounce this one back at the ex-Mormons and say, when are the ex-Mormons going to learn? The church has been playing this game since 1830. The critics are playing basketball when the church is playing football. The church has a long, long history, especially in Utah, of like bullying people, like taking property, condemning property, getting things done, pushing things through, and it's kind of like when I read like the ex-Mormon Reddit, like they're always thinking the church is about to implode, but the church has always been about to implode from the view of the critics. This is nothing new for the church. They know what they're doing. They know that memory is short. When the Bountiful Temple came in the mid-90s, it was hugely controversial. A lot of fighting when they redid the Provo Temple and put that shell on the thing. Hugely controversial. A lot of fighting. But does anybody even remember? The issues with the Monticello Temple. And we could go on and on and on. The Washington D.C. the San Diego Temple was locked up in lawsuits for like 10, 15 years. Does anybody remember? No, the church is in this for the long game. They know that they're going to win, and they know that the community will forget, and that's the problem of money and power in our society. Is it always wins? It always does. So say, when is the church going to learn? The church knows exactly what it's doing. And it knows that 2 years from now, the fact they built the building will not affect its PR in the area at all. I hate to be cynical on this point, but I've seen these things come and go, and it's money wins in our society. It's sad.
Yeah, it definitely does. Now, you can find the Mormon News Roundup on Facebook, and we're also on Instagram. Leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts about the Nauvoo Temple. Who's right on this one? Is John right, or is John Larsen right? Is Ryan Josiah right? Let us know your thoughts. We'd be very grateful for that. Now, this article is still making a lot of national news because the church just won this horrific case in Arizona, and this is making national news. USA Today: a 5-year-old child is raped. A Mormon church stays silent. Then comes the truly shocking part. So the legislation requiring clergy to report abuse is going nowhere. In fact, a key lawmaker views lawsuits as an attack on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, they're not, it's the Mormon Church Helpline, which helped hide the child abuse. And Paul Adams, he was raping both of his daughters for a period of 7 years. And this is the Utah Republican state senator, Merrill Nelson, who was an attorney who took the initial call from the LDS bishops in Arizona, reporting that the church member Paul Adam had sexually abused his daughter, according to the lawsuit. And the family has lost this lawsuit. They said that they're going to appeal, but the church let the silence go on for years. And this is, even though this wrapped up a week ago, people are still really upset about this, and this is still making a lot of national news. What are your thoughts on the AP sex abuse lawsuit that we're seeing here in Arizona, John?
Yeah, this is a big problem, and it's an American problem. I think you referenced like a leading legislature in Arizona who is standing up for the church. If it's the one I'm thinking of, he's Catholic, and when his statements about why there needs to be legal protection is, he talks about the sanctity of the confessional, which is a long principle in churches. And in of course, the American sort of Protestant Catholic tradition, that anything you say to a priest is sacrosanct and can't be taken into the law. I mean, this stuff dates back to Rome, right? The sanctity of the church versus the king versus the state, and we're playing around in that territory. As I'm kind of ruminating about the philosophy of this, let me be absolutely clear that the church, for doing stuff like this, and by the church I mean the Mormon Church and all the rest of them, the Catholic Church and everyone else, they're evil. This is terrible. This is not right. This is bad. And the fact that when the bishop calls the telephone line that's issued to the bishop whenever there's abuse, that he gets Curtin and McConkie, that tells you what the organization is. I've said it once. I'll probably say it before the thing is over. The church is a corporation. It acts like a corporation. It behaves exactly the same way all corporations do. That's protect the bottom line, protect the shareholders, and that's what it's going to do. But this is my personal belief is that human beings kind of know what's right and wrong intrinsically. And when you want human beings to do really terrible things, when you want human beings to kill other human beings, when you want human beings to imprison other human beings, you need religion for that. What religion does is it helps us know when we can circumvent our own morals. And that's exactly what all these guys think. They're righteous. All these guys think they're doing God's work because they're protecting the church. And meanwhile, the victims are the victims. And it's awful, but it's not surprising. It's sad.
Yeah, I mean, we've reported on this extensively at the Mormon News Roundup, and of course, this is going to be appealed. The lawyer who's representing the two girls in this has said that they're going to appeal, even though this is already at the Superior Court level. This is going to be appealed again, and hopefully we'll have some justice for this. But the church, again, released last week, we covered it, that the church says that they are pleased with this ruling, meaning that they don't have to pay any remunerations or any punitive damages.
Right.
They're happy about that. They're pleased about the way that this entire situation took place. Mm-hmm. And when you're pleased, that little girls received absolutely no justice for the horrific abuse that took place upon them for years. That's an ironic statement that really shook me to the core to see people who are pleased about how the way the situation ended up.
Yeah, it's we can go on and on about this, about how people, they just believe the church is true. I mean, that's why they make you start saying it from the time before you can process sentences. It just gets burned into people's frontal cortex or wherever in the brain, and then the church is true, and no matter what comes up against it, say, oh, did a bishop rape a 5-year-old, or did a bishop hear about the rape of a 5-year-old by her father? Well, the church is true, and then they just go on. But let me address the appeals thing. This thing will probably get appealed to the Supreme Court, but there's a fucking cult member. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can swear on your podcast. There's a cult member on the Supreme Court right now. Amy Covid Barrett. It belongs to a religious Yahoo group. The Supreme Court is full of religious conservatives. The church is going to win on this because the money machine and the ruling machine that is religion in the United States today will win. Hell, the Speaker of the House right now believes in setting up a theocracy in the United States. Like we're not in a good position on this, so people need to fight. And thank you for doing it.
Well, this isn't the only story here this week that has the church with legal fighting. We have the James Huntsman lawsuit here. He takes aim at LDS Church's legal moves against his tithing case. Now, this dispute, he insists, is about fraud, not religion, but other faith groups and nonprofits worry about the potential implications for their donors. So there's been a number of friend of the court briefs on all sides here. I mean, people are really lining up on this one, on James Huntsman. And this is a new filing in a brief filed just this last Monday in the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The prominent Utah and former Latter-day Saint reasserts that his federal suit, which is to recover millions of dollars in past donations, is a purely secular dispute based on his assertions of being misled, not a plunge into resolving matters of church doctrine. So, now his latest filing here, John, he's enlisted the attorneys from the American United for Separation of Church and State out of Washington, D.C. And this is what they said here. And I think this really summarizes, this is kind of a complicated case, but this summarization, I want to read this to you, get your reaction. He said, this is from the briefing on Monday. That narrow, unremarkable conclusion, they write, aligns with the long-standing rule that a religious institution's right to control religious doctrine does not allow it to defraud its members. The First Amendment guarantees that the church generally can spend its money how it wants, and the First Amendment gives the church the unfettered right to define religious terms. What the First Amendment does not do, however, is give carte blanche to the church to induce its members to donate by explicitly promising one thing and then secretly doing the opposite. That's the best summarization, I think, of this case that I've seen so far. How do you feel about what's happening with James Huntsman and his lawsuit?
Yeah, and there's a couple of things that are kind of buried in there. The defrauding in this case, what they're jumping on, because the courts have long held that fraudulent beliefs are okay.
Right.
Like you know, if the fact that you might teach that evolution is not real, even though it is, that's okay. But what Huntsman lawsuit is saying is they took money that was for tithing and then they bought stocks with it. And that's the fraud that they're in. So it's a narrower case than has usually been used in religious things. That's why it has this much purchase so far. But let's talk about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for a second. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is the Western States, and it is headquartered in California, San Francisco, I believe, and has long been a bugaboo of the right in the United States, because they believe it is a left-leaning court. I don't know. I've never looked at the political affiliation of the circuit court members. But the Ninth Circuit is what got the church in trouble with Prop 8 and eventually led to the legalization of gay marriage across the United States. Lest we forget, that was the church's fault because they pushed a case like this too far. And it was the Mormon church precedents that got gay marriage legalized in the United States through the Ninth Circuit. So the Ninth Circuit is likely to be more sympathetic to
Definitely.
this case. Mm-hmm. But if this one goes to the Supreme Court again, I think it's going to hit a brick wall. It's an interesting case. I think ultimately, and I know I'm being really super cynical this morning. I'm so sorry. But there's so much money that funnels from the churches, especially through evangelical. I mean, it's everywhere into politicians' hands, and you know, politicians in both at the state level definitely, but at the federal level tend to be much more religious and much more conservatively religious, meaning Orthodox, than the general population. So I wish the Huntsman's luck. I believe in the suit, but ultimately I don't think it's going to make it.
Yeah, so you pointed out the difference between like Tom Phillips' lawsuit, which was basically alleges that the Book of Abraham is a fraud and that the church's foundational truth claims are fraudulent. Those type of claims we've seen time and time again that they have failed. This is one of the only claims against the church that has had even a sliver of hope, because the appeals court, the circuit court in California, said that a reasonable juror could conclude that President Hinckley's statements in particular, where he said that no tithing has been or would be used for the City Creek Mall, that a reasonable juror could conclude that if James Huntsman gave tithing donations to the church under the auspice that it would be used for humanitarian purposes and not for the building of a mall, that could be considered a bait and switch situation. So that's why this has the tiniest glimmer of hope, whereas a lot of the other tithing lawsuits haven't.
Yeah, over on John DeLynne's show a couple of weeks ago, we did one on the Reed Smoot hearings back in 1904 when Senator Reed Smoot was trying to be seated in the Senate, and there were a series of hearings over a couple of years. You know, one of the precedences that came out of that is the church played this game where it distanced itself from its own officers. You know, there is this entity, the church, and then there's the you know, prophets, seers, and revelators, or general authorities, or whatever you want to call them. And the church has still played that shell game to this day, and I'm assuming that's where their defense will go, where they'll say, well, Hinckley is a man. I mean, he's serving in the office, but the church is perfect. And members even say this: the church is perfect, but the members are flawed, right? So that's why I think the membership, it won't impact them very much, because they see that distinction. It doesn't matter what any of the prophets say, because the church is flawless. So and if the church is flawless, any mistake is the mistake of man, ergo, you know, QED.
Now, speaking of money, you said that you didn't think that the James Huntsman lawsuit would probably go anywhere because of the money that's associated with religion in the United States. And just this week, John, the Ensign Peak Associates, the quarterly report has been, you know, now that the church started back in, I believe it was 2019, started reporting Ensign Peak like it was supposed to with the 13F forms. We can track the domestic disclosures, just the domestic disclosures, which are required, not the other private stocks, not the bonds, not the foreign investments, not the real estate portfolio, but just the domestic disclosures. And we see what the church has got the money. And so here from Yahoo Finance, these are the top 10 holdings of the Mormon Church's $47 billion stock portfolio. And as we know, from the leak of David Nielsen, at least this only really represents about 30% of the church's total Ensign Peak portfolio is in the domestic stocks. The remaining 70% is in those other items that I said. But the church owns a lot of money here, and this is what they own it in here. Number 10 is Tesla. They own $600 million in Tesla. ExxonMobil, they own $700 million. MasterCard, $800 million. Meta, $1 billion in Meta. United Health Group, they own $1 billion. Amazon, or $1.2 billion. Nvidia, they own $1.2 billion. Alphabet, they own almost $2 billion in Alphabet, the parent company of Google. Microsoft, $2.5 billion. And on top here, John, is Apple. They own $2.7 billion of stock in Apple. That's a lot of stocks and a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. And I think this is, to me, this is the story of the week. And like you're saying, this is just part of their holding. First of all, you know, when you talk about them owning 2.7 or whatever is billion dollars in Apple stock, most of us just can't comprehend $1 billion. Like, it's so far out of what we can think about. And, you know, but one of the revelations was that the Zion will have the streets paved with gold, right? It'll be this utopia. The church has enough money to actually do that, you know, to like line the fucking streets with gold if they wanted to. And this is where, when I keep saying it's a corporation, it's so funny because they don't know what to do with the money. Because if you look at the last 40 or 50 years, they've been slowly retreating all their charitable programs. You know, it wasn't that long ago that the churches had janitors. Like, they had individuals who had a paid position that kept the churches clean. And even though they're making more and more and more money, they got rid of all of them, then asked the members to do it, as if the members weren't already overloaded enough. And then you can go on thing after thing after thing about this. People who work at the church office building know they're constantly under pressure to not ask for raises and blah, 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 blah. But it's where the church puts its money is what's telling. First of all, these companies are every single company on there is notorious for some reason. There's been some moral failing. You know, the top ones are involved in child slavery to extract heavy metals and cobalt and stuff. They, you know, like ExxonMobil. Do we even need to talk about the sins of that company? You know, Tesla doing all sorts of negative things to workers, union busting and stuff. The church constantly tries to say we're neutral. You know, we're not political. We are just God's thing. But everything they do stinks of like corporate, heavy-handed, capitalistic bullshit, you know? And the fact that there's no morality whatsoever in the investment in these companies just shows who they are. And it's a never-ending head-scratcher to me how the members don't see it, which is why you're getting all this cynicism out of me this morning.
That's what's made you famous, John. But the church does have morals, John. I'll push back with you. They will not put any money into Starbucks. That's where we draw the line.
Well, you know, NVIDIA, right? That company basically makes video cards, and everybody knows. Well, not everybody knows that if you work in tech, you know that the broadcasting technology, the technology we're using right now, has been driven by the porn industry. And I'm not trying to explicitly make a connection between NVIDIA or whatever. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, and porn in the church. But, you know, like gaming and all that kind of stuff. This is not what the church is about from what they say from the red pulpit, but it is where they put their money. And where people put their money is what matters the most.
Yeah, definitely. You know, if you could, for those of you out there, we drop all of these podcasts on YouTube. We also drop them onto Apple Podcasts and onto Amazon as well. Speaking of Amazon, I guess we got to use them. Give us a 5-star. Give us a 5-star review. Drop us a like. We'd really appreciate that. Now, the biggest article, I guess, this week here is that Elder M. Russell. I got to make sure I'm saying this. Elder M. Russell Ballard has passed away, and I wish his family the very best, and I wish the entire situation. It's very sad. I just want to put that out there right there. But we do I do want to talk about it because it is probably the biggest news article of the week. And the conspiratorial guys here, the conspiracies are out there already. It's incredible. They just start right away. And I got this from last week. It says, well, people are Googling it. When you ask the internet if M. Russell Ballard passed away, and the only two sources are Exmo, Reddit, and Wikipedia, you should be skeptical. So literally people are saying, well, maybe he's still alive. And this is starting off with the conspiracies. The QAnon people are out in force right from the get-go on this one.
Still? I mean, they've had a funeral for him, right? Like,
this was right at the beginning, because the church had, because the church announcement lagged a little bit behind. See, the people got a little bit ahead. This is the entire point here. Let me show you this. The first person who got this out here was Kevin R. Duncan, who works full-time for the church. He's mid-level management, and he scooped, this is crazy, John. He scooped the church's announcement of M. Russell Ballard dying before the actual announcement. That's why the Reddit was updated. That's why the Wikipedia was updated. But the conspiratorial church members out there, they didn't know what to believe because the official announcement wasn't out there already. So this is just crazy here. Kevin R. Duncan, a middle management church member, scooped the church by being the one to break the news of Russell Ballard's death. Let me play this reel here, and I'll get your reaction on the scoop. This is kind of weird and kind of crazy.
Has passed away. So there is a little bit of a story behind this announcement. He passed away on the 12th of November. However, sometime on the 13th, his Wikipedia page was updated, starting to use the past tense to refer to him and stating that he died on the 12th of November. I believe this was updated on the back of a post by Kevin R. Duncan on his X account. This post was made in the early hours of November the 13th, before the church had made their official announcement, and therefore was subsequently removed because Kevin R. Duncan jumped the gun in announcing M. Russell Ballard's death. His passing also comes in the midst of controversy regarding him and Tim Ballard. The state of the relationship between the two of those individuals is a topic that remains hotly contested by the church's PR department and media outlets. My condolences to Elder Ballard's family, and the question on everyone's mind now is, who will be the apostle who replaces him? You've heard my predictions already, but let me know what you think in the comments.
Okay, so John, let me get this straight. He wants to be the first one to rush out to tell the world, my boss is dead. I just can't wait to tell the world, my boss is dead. I want to be the first one to bring this to you.
That's the way the internet works, right? Like, you got to be first. Like this is just what happens. And let's be clear. Ballard was 95 years old. like he was old. Like, death was imminent, one way or the other. Like that. So there's if he was 50, maybe there would be some conspiratorial stuff. But yeah, he's been in the news a lot lately. So there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, look at that." I do know that the church has a cadre of volunteers who police, because I've run into them before, and I've talked to one of them at least, who police like all Wikipedia and that sort of stuff. So they subscribe, to each article associated with the church, so they see changes coming in real time. These volunteers, and they try to scrub. It's the exact job that Winston had in 1984. They try to scrub the internet for stuff that's related to the church. But, every time that a general authority goes into the hospital or whatever, there's always some nurse or some ambulance driver or something who leaks the story out. So the fact that there were people racing this, I don't see that as anything like other than what, normal ambulance chasers and paparazzi sort of thing, right?
I get the ambulance chasers and the paparazzi. The problem here is that Kevin R. Duncan, he works for the church full time. And it's like, I can't wait until I tell you that my boss is dead. I just want to be the first one out there so that I get a few more followers on Twitter. That seems pretty perverse. But I got the reaction for Kevin R. Duncan. I think this is the best response to him. Kevin, we are so happy that you are so happy that he's dead. Okay, because it really seemed like he was excited about it. I know people might criticize this podcast and say we're laughing about somebody's death. No, Kevin R. Duncan seemed to be very excited about the situation. So from the bottom of my heart, Kevin, we're happy that you're happy that he's dead, because that's how it came across, at least to me.
Yeah, I mean, you got a point. It's the the king is dead, long live the king sort of thing. That the closest thing we have to palace intrigue. I will give the church credit for this. By having its top leadership be really old, they solved a lot of the sexual conduct problems that brings down most organizations. The last member of the 12 to be excommunicated for sex stuff was in 1946.
Right, Lyman.
Yeah, that for Mormons, a new member of the 12 for a brief minute is the most exciting piece of news, and I think he's just excited about that. It's going to be something new. It's going to be all that. But yeah, people sharing information on the internet for 15 seconds of fame is not that new.
Yeah, so here's the official announcement here, John. We're saddened to announce that President M. Russell Ballard, acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, has died after a recent hospital stay. He returned to his home where he attended to duties as he was able to before passing away at approximately 11:15 p.m. on Sunday, surrounded by his family members. And I guess the joke here is that maybe this announcement should have been made by Vice News. If you think about, because then people would believe it if it comes out of Vice News, for
right.
Sure.
Well, the other related thing here is, of course, Jeffrey R. Holland was in the hospital for the last 3 weeks, so he was on death watch. He was the one they thought where it was going, so it was kind of a surprise bait and switch, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely was. We're going to talk about Jeffrey R. Holland in a minute. The funeral home here has already said that they don't want you to send flowers, but instead to make donations directly to either Ensign Peak or OUR, John. I think that's... but go ahead.
Or you can send checks here to us. We'll take them too.
Okay, or to your farm on johnlarsen.com, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Or, I believe this is one of the first times that a direct descendant of Joseph Smith or Hiram Smith is not in a top-tier leadership position, because there's always been a descendant of either Hiram Smith or Joseph Smith, all the way up to Joseph Fielding Smith, who was called in 1970, and Ballard was called right around that time as well. So this is the first time that we've been without Joseph Smith or Hiram Smith's direct descendants. I don't know how the leadership's going to function without one of those two direct descendants in there.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Curtin McConkie, this is the church's law firm. They already issued a letter to Lynn Packer banning him from the funeral home and the cemetery. They don't want him anywhere near. That he's the one who's done all the reporting on Elder Packer, by the way, and he's done all of the reporting on Elder Packer on Elder Ballard's kind of shady business dealings. And the other thing is, he's 95 when he died. And that's that's way too young for an apostle to die, because that's literally in the prime of your apostolic life. Because that everyone now is living to be in their 90s. This is prime time for him. And one thing that I seriously did notice, John, is that the church, they never. This is serious. The church never asks for prayers from senior church leaders. They never do. But when President Nelson recovered from his fall recently, he will thank you for the prayers that he never asked for. They never. He's been in the hospital for 5 weeks. He's been in and out of the hospital for quite some time, but the church will never ask you to pray for them. Why does the church not asking for prayers for Elder Holland, for President Nelson, for President Ballard? Why are they never going to ask you for a prayer for any of these guys?
It's an interesting question. I don't have an answer rightly. I do know. I have had. I have to be vague. I've had some connections into church security over the years. These guys do have legitimate, like, weirdos and crazy people stalking them. They have bodyguards and stuff like that. So I think some of the secretiveness is not as conspiratorial as it's just like there's nutballs out there who would kill them. But I do like all things the church does, it takes it too far. And, they're just like Hollywood celebrities. They become general authorities. They can't really go out in public anymore because people fawn all over them. I had an interesting experience on that note, and it's kind of related here. When I was young at BYU, I worked for BYU Police. I've talked about that over and over. And one of the things I did was event security. And I was at a football game one time. This would be about 1996, around about there. And Hinckley was coming out. He had come in. And he had rode the elevators up to the top boxes, and he was coming down, and there was a space of about, I would guess, 75 yards between the closest place we could park the Lincoln town cars or whatever it is they drove around in, and where he had got out of the elevator. So he had to walk this short distance. Of course, when he was walking that short distance, he was surrounded by his own, G-men, the suited, armed officers that the church keeps, and then of course BYU and Provo Police. But as the word got out into the crowd that he was there, the crowd started thronging. And so I was standing there as the crowd thronged. And it was really a life-changing event because there were people who were just sobbing, and they were running into my body full, like they were trying to grab him. They were trying to grab his clothes. They were trying to touch him. And just that energy of the crowd. Just, I remember the one woman who was in front of me who was just almost manic in her screams and her sobs to try to touch Gordon Hinckley. I don't envy the life these guys have. They elevate themselves into these positions, and that's why they all live in Midway, Utah, where they're surrounded by other multimillionaires who leave them alone. But yeah, it's. Whenever you're dealing with that level of celebrity, things get weird.
Yeah, I mean, Howard Hunter in 1993, he was held in a bomb in the Marriott Center. He was held, his life was in peril. They definitely need security. Going back to the praying for senior church leaders, I think the issue is that the church never wants you to set up yourself in a situation where they're asking you for a prayer that could not be answered, because eventually your prayers for the recovery of the senior church leaders, they will go unheard eventually, and they don't want anyone to say, "Oh, you told me to pray for a senior church leader, and they passed away. What's wrong? My prayers aren't being answered." So therefore, they will never ask for any prayers for a senior church leader ever.
Sure. That seems reasonable.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And people are wondering, he was under a lot of scrutiny in these last couple of weeks here about his relationship with Tim Ballard. He was really in a level of scrutiny. His legacy was being called greatly into question. And people are wondering, did the last couple of months take a toll on him physically and mentally, of being credibly linked to a sexual deviant and a fraudster who he repeatedly, the allegations are that he repeatedly linked to wealthy Mormon donors. He trotted him out as a good representative of the church. And they're saying, did that take a toll on him for the chink in his legacy? That's obviously something I don't know the answer to.
Could be. He was 95. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure he didn't. It's probably is worth saying. It's hard to understand what these guys' mental acumen is. We know of several cases, where both with Monson, who is suffering from dementia, and Benson, the two I know about, who was just the last few years was just not even there mentally. That when you have a geriocracy like this, you're going to run into problems of old age, of these guys who just, like you were implying, they don't get up and say prayers, they don't do things like that. And I don't even know if at 95 if Russell Ballard was even aware of what was going on with Tim Ballard, because it's just, he's so old. But it very well could be that was a strain on him that took him out in the end.
Yeah. Let me show you the contrast between the way that this was covered by the church news, between Elder Ballard passing away and Sister Kathleen Eyring, who recently passed away. And I see a lot of irony here, and I just want to see your thoughts on this. So this is the official pictures of him in the announcement of him passing away. And you will see that here he is. He's by himself. He's by himself in all of these pictures. He's basically, his wife is nowhere to be found. But if we look at Kathleen Eyring, who just passed away just a month ago, she is always with her husband in every single picture. So, John, why is it that when a man passes away, his wife is nowhere to be found, but when a woman passes away, she doesn't get one shot by herself? Why is there a difference in between this coverage? And don't forget that, Kathleen Eyring, she was, she was part of the first presidency. That's even higher than President Ballard. So you can't say that it was because she wasn't in a high, she wasn't in the top tier.
Well, the church doesn't make any qualms about this. The role of women is to support men in the church. Everything women do that doesn't involve a man is called an auxiliary in the church. The word auxiliary means it's not part of the main function. I think we oftentimes act surprised when the church does what the church says it's going to do. But yeah, women are not just second class; they're second class from the get go. It's Mormon doctrine that in the Garden of Eden that God said that man should rule over women, and the church still believes that, and that's what they do.
One more shot of this. Here is the difference. On the left is President Ballard just had his funeral just a short time ago with the full Mormon Tabernacle Choir, all of the general authorities in attendance, and his casket is front and center. But on the right here, John, this is Patricia Holland, who, by the way, was a general officer of the church, the wife of President Holland. So she was a general officer of the church, not just a quote unquote wife. Okay. On the right, she's only in this small section. She's off to the side, and all the general authorities are front and center. There's a huge difference when you have that extra, when you have the Y chromosome, you get a different type of coverage when it comes to your funeral in the church, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. Nobody's pretending anything different. Well, I guess some people are, but not official church doctrine. That's fully expected, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and this is what people are saying, tying this together. So we have a major publications are alleging that President Ballard provided information of wealthy LDS members to be solicited by Operation Underground Railroad. He simply says, no, that did not happen. He refuses to elaborate further, and then he dies. Well, wow, that's they say dead men tell no tales. That he wasn't gonna say anything about that. He never made one statement about it. And here is here's our seniority here. We have Russell M. Nelson, he's at the top. And then we had Dallin H. Oaks, and then we had M. Russell Ballard here. So we're jockeying for position to see who is going to fill out the quorum of the 12 here. And that kind of got me thinking about it. Who will fill the vacancy? I can tell you this: it's not going to be a humble carpenter, elementary school teacher, or a waiter. How about maybe a big time donor executive or a law partner who could, maybe a relative of a family member? What are your guesses? Who's going to be that replacement for the quorum of the 12?
To be honest with you, I don't even know who they are anymore. I don't track them, but I can guarantee you they are part of the current capitalistic schools of thought. Either they're going to be like an MBA or a CPA or a lawyer, most likely. Most likely they'll come from an Ivy League school and have a major corporate experience, either in the Mormon corporate empire or elsewhere in America. There's an off chance they might pull somebody who has done major work with American corporations, who is from another country. If they can get somebody up there like that. The last theologian to be in office, in my esteem, was Packard. We haven't had anybody who's really theologically inclined since then, which is part of the reason the church is getting so dull. They don't have anything interesting to say because they're not real super theologically bright. These guys, they don't really understand Mormon theology, which is why the church flounders so much. They understand business. They understand because you need somebody to run the corporate empire, right? The church has its hands in lots of stuff, and charity is just a small wing of that.
Yeah, I mean, the apostles are rotating on the Deseret Management Corporation board. The first presidency are the permanent board members, and then the apostles have a rotating position under there. So typically you're going to need somebody with a lot of corporate experience to be able to be running multi-million-dollar corporations. But that does make a lot of sense in some ways. If you go over to sportsline.com, John, I found this here. If you go to sportsline.com, you can bet on anything these days, John. LDS Moneyline Apostle picks here. Gerald Kaze, he's a plus 7.5. I don't know my betting stuff. I don't really know what that means. Gerald Kaze plus 7.5. Kieran P. Kieran, and even Sherry Dew. John, you can even put some money on Sherry Dew. I would be willing to put my my mortgage on the opposite for the Sherry Dew pick.
Yeah. You want to short Sherry Dew.
Yeah, that's the pick that I want to put my mortgage on, because that one is the one that I think is not going to happen. This is a joke. I believe this is a joke, by the way. I don't think you can actually go onto Sportsline. I checked it. I didn't see that you could bet it, but the actual announcement here is that President Jeffrey R. Holland was set apart on Wednesday, November 15th, as acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He succeeds Ballard M. Russell, who died on November 12th. John, wait a minute. He's set apart. What happened to Common Council? What happened to being sustained in General Conference? How is he set apart with absolutely no Common Council of the church?
What happened when Brigham Young said there was only one prophet and he died in Nauvoo? I don't know. The church is constantly changing all that stuff, and they've just consolidated power and consolidated power and consolidated power. And yeah, there's a long history of it. I invite everyone to go read D. Michael Quinn's series of books about it. And, you'll see that they've constantly, yeah, they don't play by the rules that they think they do, or they say they do.
That are required in the Doctrine and Covenants, that are required. You're required to have common consent at the local level, but at the top level, it doesn't really matter. And in fact, President Nelson was set apart as the prophet before General Conference as well, when it used to be that it would take several years for the new prophet to be set apart. That way you could have church involvement. That doesn't happen anymore. And this is prime example number one of that happening. And this is the crazy thing about President Holland, is he is also in extremely poor health. In fact, this is from the church news itself here. He said, personally, may I say that during my recent 5-week hospital stay, 3 weeks of which were spent in an unconscious journey to the doorstep of death, that President Ballard gave me blessings or visited or called the hospital every single day for those touch-and-go weeks while my life hung in the balance. So we've now put in a member of the acting president of the Quorum of the 12, just spent 5 weeks in the hospital, 3 of which he was basically in a coma. And this is what you just said, John. You need people who can lead all of these multi-million-dollar organizations and operations and the billions that the church brings in. How is Elder Holland going to be able to shoulder this responsibility when he has been in a coma for 3 weeks and been in the hospital for 5 weeks? I thought we would need somebody who could actually do the job.
Well, yes, and I was a little bit misleading there. That it's implying that the 15 are the ones actually calling the shot for the corporations, but the whole actual governance structure of the church is really complicated, because a lot of the financial holdings are under the corporation of the presiding bishop, and I've read before that there's only a handful, even maybe down to 2 people, who have all the keys to the financial kingdom, who really understand where it all is. And even people who work in finance in the church say, it's convoluted and not real well understood, and there's secret stuff over here and secret things over there. And you can read, I think everyone who cares should read Kimball's autobiography and then his biography by his son. He talks about when he gets into office that he's just shuffled away, doing this thing after that thing after that thing. And there's no real time anymore to sit down and read or understand or do all those things. So I think the church has become an entity in of itself. I don't think there's any there's nobody at the top calling the shots as it were, because it's such a convoluted mess. And what are these guys even doing? It's hard to say. But you talk about them being ill of health. They're all really old. I don't know. They're all struggling from health issues because they're human beings. They're not supermen. Yeah. I would dare say of the 15, probably 6 of them are invalid to some degree or the other at any given time. And of course, there's been studies shown that the average age of the Quorum of the 12 with the advent of modern medicine, they're getting older and older and older and older. So we're having more problems with dementia, more problems with immobility and that sort of stuff. So yeah, this is going to be if you put the oldest person of the 15 in as the president of the church, it's game over. Maybe Hinckley was the last lucid president of the church that they'll ever have until they reform the system.
Except for Bednar. See, Bednar is he's only 10. Bednar is 70 years old now, and everyone who's above him is 90. So in 10 years, we'll have an 80-year-old, assuming that Elder Bednar's health holds up, which he looks like he's in great health. We will have an 80-year-old member of president of the church in about 10 years. So but generally, yes, they are all going to be really, really gone. And that's the thing, is we could have put anyone in as the acting president of the 12, including Elder Uchtdorf, which is everybody's favorite apostle. A lot of people, I guarantee, if you look at the followers on Instagram, by the way, John, you can tell who the favorite apostle is, and it's Dieter F. Uchtdorf. And this is what I got this tweet as well, that it says, President Nelson would rather have a weekend at Bernie's, a kind of an Elder Holland who's completely diminished, a sidelined Elder Holland, than allow Dieter F. Uchtdorf back into a power position, because he's still got the beef with President Hinckley. So we wouldn't see Dieter Uchtdorf. Remember, President Nelson demoted Dieter Uchtdorf, which has been one of the only demotions of the first presidency in the last 60 years. And he's not going to bring him back on because of the beef with Hinckley. I know that's kind of conspiratorial, but why are we going to put somebody? Dieter Uchtdorf, his faculties are still well there. He's not in a coma for 3 weeks. He's not been in the hospital receiving kidney dialysis. A lot of people are wondering, why didn't we put someone in who's ready to go for this position instead of just a company man? I think that's a reasonable question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered it. There's always splits in the quorum, and the last big ones were in the 70s. You know, you had the diehards following David McKay, Lee, and Kimball, and some of those guys, and of course that's when the last sort of liberals like Hubie Brown and stuff were pushed out of decision making. You go back to the 19th century, and there were big fights and infights and quits and excommunications and all that kind of stuff. So it's become relatively calm, but you know, it's like you're implying, it's still there, and Uchtdorf is out of favor with others. You know, and I think you have two types of members of the 12. You have the old guard, people who are part of the family dynasties, people part of the families that have been in power for a long time. And then you have oftentimes rising stars like Uchtdorf, who doesn't have those connections, which means he doesn't have the same political back-end coverage. You know, you briefly mentioned the story that, you know, they're saying that the tithing donation lists that Ballard had were shared with Tim Ballard.
Yeah.
That very well could be, but it doesn't need to be because there is a big power circle that rotates around the church of the mega rich and the donors. And oftentimes the church goes to them and asks them for money. You know, like the Nauvoo temple was done largely on donations from some of the mega rich. People in these circles and people who watch these circles know who these folks are. They all know who these folks are because they don't make secret the fact that they're the power brokers. They don't make it public, but if you're in the power circle. So what I'm saying is that Tim Ballard, if he got anywhere near the circles of the church power, which he did, we can see by photographs, he would have known who the power donators are. I know who some of them are, and I'm nobody. So that's this whole backstory of what's going on, the palace intrigue behind the scenes. And you know what? It always goes on. I don't care if you're talking about the Tsar of Russia or the Politburo or you know, the College of Cardinals or whatever. There's always political intrigue, and we're just seeing some of it manifest here. And I guess the bottom line point for me is the church is just no different than any other organization, which speaks to the fact that it's not what it says it is. It's not like the true church of God because it just does the same stuff that humans do everywhere.
Yeah, let me get a couple of last thoughts on the passing here. I want to play a couple of videos of some of his teachings very, very briefly, get some thoughts on that. White Cat Prophecy, who we had on this podcast, he gave a kind of a nice tribute to him. I think he said regarding Elder Ballard's passing, everything else aside, he was the only apostle that I'm aware of that, number one, specifically encouraged members to listen to LGBTQ members' experiences, which he did. Number two, he's the only apostle who ever used the term LGBTQ, which I believe that is correct. I believe that is right. And number three, he's the only one who ever explicitly condemned nationalism. It's an extremely low bar for sure, but worth remembering. So there's a couple of positives. I do want to play a couple of his clips and get your reactions to them. And number one, this is some of his greatest hits, in my opinion. This is to a women's conference. Let's listen to his advice to women here.
Oh, geez.
Let your voices be heard. We cannot meet our destiny of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in preparing this world for the second coming of the Savior of the world without the support and the faith and the strength of the women of this church. We need you. We need your voices. They need to be heard. They need to be heard in your community, in your neighborhoods. They need to be heard within the ward council or the branch council. Don't talk too much in those council meetings. Just straighten the brethren out quickly and move the work on. We're building the kingdom of God. We're preparing the world for the second coming of the Savior and the Redeemer of the world.
Yeah, we need your voices, John. Just don't say too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly what you expect somebody of his age to say.
Yeah. Or how about this one? This is one of his other famous clips here, which a lot of people bring up, and it says the church with transparency. Let's hear what his thoughts about transparency.
Saying that the church has been hiding the fact that there is more than one version of the first vision, which is just not true. The facts are we don't study, we don't go back and search what has been said on the subject. For example, Dr. James B. Allen of the BYU in 1970, he produced an article for the church magazines explaining all about the different versions of the first vision.
How long ago was that article?
1970. That was back in 1970. So
been hiding that for a long time.
Yeah. but it's this idea that the church is hiding something, which we would have to say as two apostles who have covered the world and know the history of the church and know the integrity of the first presidency and the Quorum of the 12 from the beginning of time. There has been no attempt on the part in any way of the church leaders trying to hide anything from anybody. Now we've had the Joseph Smith papers. We didn't have those where they were in our hands now. And so we're learning more about the prophet Joseph. It's wonderful we are. There's volumes of it. There's so much of in those books now in my bookshelf. Maybe you've read them all, but I haven't got. I'm a slow reader.
That much.
So just trust us wherever you are in the world, and you share this message with anyone else who raises the question about the church not being transparent. We're as transparent as we know how to be in telling the truth. We have to do that. That's the Lord's way.
So, John, just trust us. That's the Lord's way. We're as transparent as we know how to be, and we've never hid anything from anyone.
The biggest problem with lies and liars is most of the time the liars believe their own lies. What they're doing is called dissembly, which is a act of saying things that are all factually true. I mean, Oakes there was on the Supreme Court. You know, he knows how to play the game, and they can say things that are technically factually true, but the whole thing is a lie, and they know it's a lie. Well, and that's my one of my points I made earlier. Maybe they don't. Oakes does. Oakes knows he's lying. Ballard may not. He may not have spent any time studying the history of the church. He may not know that there's multiple first accounts. He may have only ever read apologetic responses that are full of the same kind of distortions and half-truths and lies. This is why in court you say, I'm going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the church does not appeal to, they don't rely on those standards. They might tell the truth, but they sure as fuck don't tell the whole truth, and they sure don't tell nothing but the truth, because these guys are more than happy to let half the membership believe that they're like talking to Jesus every day. And if they were honest men, they would come forth and say, you know what, that doesn't happen. That's not real. It's not the way this works. But they're not.
A couple last of Elder Ballard's greatest hits, because I doubt that this could be the only time that you get a chance to see these last clips here. But I queued these up here for you, John. He actually gives us a little bit of beauty advice, which is very interesting. Let's check out his thoughts on approaches to attractiveness and beauty.
Well, you know, every time we look at you, I know you're just waiting for me to talk about marriage, aren't you? I would not want to disappoint you. I just simply say to you, brethren, wake up. Open your eyes and look around a little. You beautiful girls, don't wander around looking like men. Put on a little lipstick now and then and look a little charming. It's that simple. I don't know why we make this whole process so hard.
You just need to put on a little lipstick, John. And for women, you need to look attractive. You need to put on a little lipstick. For the men, did you catch the men's advice? The men's advice, they just need to be there. But women, yeah, you got to look good.
Well, you know, there is that clip is actually a little encouraging. They are flat out laughing at the message, you know, of this guy who they believe. Like you can tell that most of the audience thinks that he's just like an old buffoon. It's like a joke, like he's telling a joke. That's how they're processing it. Of course, he's not, because he says it over and over again. But you know, he's speaking. he was born before the Great Depression, right? I mean, he comes from a different era. Nice.
Yeah. I mean, he said put on a little lipstick. Is that just for the ladies? Maybe I got it backwards here. Actually,
yeah. You know, and I will say this. I will give a little commentary here. The church has its own problem, and I feel bad for the youth. The church started in the 90s and through the 2000s. They've backed off since then. They backed off actually about the time Trump came in. That they were really on a big anti-porn campaign. And the problem is porn is so readily available that the percentages of people who have looked at it or continue to look at it, you know, at least once a month, it's like, for men, it's like statistical dust of the ones who report not to. And for women, you know, it's still like 50% or 60% or something like that. So the church has a porn problem. And the problem is, of course, because they made it rhetorically such a big deal. Well, the church went and they did firesides and talks and stuff in especially the 2000s to teach women how to, this is absolutely true, to teach women how to police and, you know, look at the browser histories and stuff like that. We have a whole generation that grew up where porn was readily available all over the place. You know, I don't mean to be curmudgeonly, but in my day, you know, you had to work to find porn when you were 12. It's impacted marriage because there's a lot of young women who've been taught, young adult women, I mean, who've been taught to not accept porn addiction in men that they date or men that they marry. And I use the word addiction very loosely here. I'm using the church's term. So they introduced this sexual vibe that has caused a decline in the ability of people to connect and have relationships. A. B. Culturally, we see a decline in the traditional kind of marriage dance anyway, outside the church. So the church is trying to fix this problem that they kind of created themselves. And I think this is one of those things that when I listen to them, I'm just like, oh man, you don't even understand what's going on. You're so far removed from dating. You're so far removed from being 20 years old that you think it has to do with lipstick. You know, in my day, when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, the brethren would go on and on about nylons. They were really upset that women in the 90s stopped wearing pantyhose. And it's just they're always 30, 50 years behind. That's just who they are.
Yeah, but that's absolutely true. But they are on the up and up when it comes to propping up credibly accused fraudsters and sexual deviants. And we're going to cover that a little bit more at the end of the episode. Here's President Ballard letting us know that Tim Ballard is really quite a guy here, John. So there's a couple of other, I just got two last clips here from Elder Ballard's legacy.
I had the opportunity this past summer to travel to Plymouth, Massachusetts with my friend Tim Ballard to learn more about what he had learned regarding Nephi's vision of these early pilgrims and how their history corroborates Nephi's vision.
Yeah, so I mean, what we're getting from this is in his official capacity as president, acting president of the 12, in a BYU devotional, he's letting everybody know that Tim Ballard is one heck of a guy who's got great connections to the prophet Nephi, as we found out. Yeah, we got that one wrong too. It's not just about lipstick. It's about, and the allegation is that he's then connecting these wealthy Mormon donors to a credibly accused fraudster. This is all part of his legacy that you're not going to read about in the church news.
Well, I mean, Joseph Smith was a fraudster and a sexual deviant. So you got a whole movement that has a carve-out for powerful men who are fraudsters and sexual deviants. So, of course, that every so often the dark triad personality rises up and realizes how to exploit the system, and that's what Tim Ballard did. He exploited fears of people. He would make up enemies and speak to the fears of middle America. The fact that, you know, one of these guys bought into it, not surprising, sad.
Yeah, this is the last clip that I want to queue up for you. And you said that you left the church that you're no longer a member. And this is probably Elder Ballard's most viral clip. In fact, it's an extremely viral clip out of all the general authorities. It's his famous "Where Will You Go" clip. And this really has made the rounds on TikTok. It's on Instagram. It's really everywhere. And I want you to just take a look at this clip and answer his question: where will you go if you leave the church? And let's just take a look at this. Is maybe one of his most lasting clips.
If any one of you is faltering in your faith I ask you the same question that Peter asked. To whom shall you go? If you choose to become inactive or to leave the restored Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where will you go? What will you do? The decision to walk no more with the church members and the Lord's chosen leaders will have a long-term impact that cannot always be seen right now. There may be some doctrine, some policy, some bit of history that puts you at odds with your faith, and you may feel that the only way to resolve that inner turmoil right now is to walk no more with the saints. If you live as long as I have, you will come to know that things have a way of resolving themselves. An inspired insight or revelation may shed new light and insight on an issue. Remember, the restoration is not an event, but it continues to unfold.
So, John, where will you go? What will you do? Can you answer Elder Ballard's question?
Oh, the places you'll go. It's amazing. You get to be free, free in one's mind to pursue, to learn, to grow, to ask questions, to remove the guardrails, and you can find out what is harmful and what is wrong because it causes harm, and you can find out what is joyful and what is beautiful because it brings joy and beauty. I've met many, many thousands of people who've left this church and other churches, and I've met some people who go back. And even the ones that go back are never the same. They're touched in a way that makes them more introspective, more curious about the world as it is, and it allows one to see beauty and pain. You know, the problem with wearing blinders like the church is it does simplify everything. It gives you an easier set of things to do and focus on in life. And you know, when it's like walking up, you know, in Zion Park down there, there's Angel's Landing, which is this. I can't do it. But it's this hike that there's a chain and it goes all the way up to the top of this little spire, way up high. And I would use Nephi's or Joseph Smith's analogy, like you're walking up that trail in the dark, or like let's say there's a fog holding onto that chain, but the fog is the church. The fog is the what the church gives, and once you realize that the church is not true and you go outside of it, you look down either side and you say, my God, I can fall down there. But the beauty of what you can see, the blue skies, the colored rock mountains, the green trees, is beyond beautiful. And there's a reality to it. Every year somebody falls off that damn thing and dies. That's the reality. But there's a joy and a happiness in seeing the world as it really is, in not trying to tell yourself stories all the time to make yourself feel better about death and life and everything. I feel sorry for him because he spent his life inside this box. And once you step out of the box and you let the scales fall off your eyes a little bit, you can see the box. And the problem is they can't see the box because they're in the fucking box. And we keep telling them, hey man, you're in a fucking box. Get out of the box and you'll see this beautiful world. Isn't this what Socrates told us? Isn't this what Plato told us about the allegory of the cave? We're watching shadows dance on the wall, and reality is out there, and reality is scary, and reality is beautiful, and reality is big, and reality is coming at us. And it's worth seeing. Whatever's going to happen to humanity, whatever's going to happen to us, it's worth it to see it with open eyes. And I think he couldn't be more utterly wrong, leaving himself locked in a cage.
Yeah, that's a very powerful testimony. That's really a powerful testimony. I do want to cover two last things about his particular legacy, because I doubt that we're ever going to ruminate much on him ever again. So part of his legacy is the fact that he was at the helm when the church got, as the acting president of the Quorum of the 12, when the church was fined $5 million for fraudulent disclosures to the SEC. That's definitely part of his legacy that you're not going to read about in the church news. And all the way back in 1963, the SEC revoked M. Russell Ballard's broker-dealer registration due to his false and misleading statements when he was running basically a sham operation with the Utah penny stock market at the time. So he's had 2 run-ins with the SEC, back one in 1963 and one just last year, with regards to making false and misleading and fraudulent statements. And if we couple that with Lynn Packer's reporting about his shady business dealings, his legacy is incredibly spotty. We'll just put it that way. And one last thing on this as well, and then we'll conclude on M. Russell Ballard. If you go on over to the Widow's Mite report, they did a complete analysis of church leaders' compensation. And it turns out here, because we have the leaked reporting, 4 different leaked reports of how much the general authorities make. They all make the same amount, whether you're in the Quorum of the 70, the presiding bishopric, the First Presidency, or the Quorum of the 15. And if you look at the cumulative total compensation since being called as a general authority, M. Russell Ballard here, he stands alone. He is the most well-compensated general authority since Brigham Young. Okay, because Brigham Young, he died as a multi-millionaire, one of the richest men west of the Mississippi. But since that time, M. Russell Ballard, he's made more as a church employee than any other church person, because he's been a general authority for a stunning, I believe it is 47 years, because he was in the Quorum of the 70 before he was in the Quorum of the 15. Yeah, he's made a lot of money with this church, and he has an incredibly spotty, we'll put it this way, he has a very troubled legacy that really, and just my own editorial opinion here, I think it contributed his legacy, that the idea that he was linked to Tim Ballard, that he wasn't able to detect the fraud, that he's had all these shady business dealings. I think it directly led to his poor health and his eventual demise. Any last thoughts on M. Russell Ballard, John?
Yeah, he is a part of the mid '90s old guard. You know, he's been around since the Hinckley years and that sort of stuff. So you know, I can think about some of the rumors I've heard about him over the years. I don't know if they bear repeating, but yeah, he's had a long history of being have a reputation of being a little bit shady when it comes to business. And now he's just what I expect. You know, he's just like he's exactly what you would think. Just what the church does. So it's sad. I hope he had a good life, and you know, it's sad when family loses their patriarch like that, but yeah, I guess on to the next.
Yeah, you talked about possibly enriching himself, and the allegation here is that Russell Ballard, we're transitioning into our last article here, which is Tim Ballard. The allegation is that M. Russell Ballard invested into the for-profit portion of Operation Underground Railroad. Therefore, when he's contacting wealthy Mormon millionaires like Russell Brunson, that he was personally enriching himself and his son-in-law. And so this is all the way up, not just in 1963, not just when the church got fined for the SEC, but all the way up into the end. The allegation is that he's using his personal position as a personal witness to the name of Jesus Christ to personally enrich himself and his family members, even though he was the most well-compensated church employee, church general authority since Brigham Young. So that's the allegation. But we have a statement here from Operation Underground Railroad here that just dropped this last week here, John. It says Operation Underground Railroad says it did not have access to LDS tithing records. The nonprofit group says the allegation it has access to tithing information made in a recent lawsuit is unsubstantiated and based on improperly obtained memos.
Well, no, you know, deny, demand proof. That's what they always say. So I personally would doubt that, you know, the accusation you have that he's been the most enriched since Brigham Young. We've had other lawsuits come up with the Smith family and stuff that show lots of wealth that was controlled by, like, Joseph F. Smith, where he started serving in the Quorum when he was in his 20s. Now, it's amazing how fast things change. It bears mentioning how general authorities, how the 12 used to make their money up until the 90s. So the church held controlling stock in a lot of private companies, and I would recommend, I think the book is by a guy named Schur, something like that, from the 80s, called The Mormon Corporate Empire, and he actually does the work and traces all the companies that the church had controlling stake in. For example, Union Pacific Railroad. So what would happen is when somebody would get into the quorum of the 12, they would take a minuscule salary, and then they would be appointed to the board of directors of these for-profit. About this because during the business era of the 60s and 70s, it was sort of well known. Yeah, Shoop is the name I was searching for. It was sort of well known, so they'd say, oh, here's Gordon Hinckley. He serves on the board of this company of Deseret News and of the blah 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 blah, and they would take a profit from all of those companies, and they would take windfall profits, bonuses that were given to directors, which of course they have a controlling stake. So it was the way even that was set up under Brigham Young. It had been that long that they would enrich themselves by being part of the secular arm of the church, if that makes sense. And then it started getting more and more bad press, and then the church, I think mid-90s, committed that they were going to wean the church officer, because the question was, well, you're supposed to be this quorum of the 12 guy who's talking to Jesus, and yet you're serving on the board of Union Pacific. How does one find time to do both of those things? So the church pledged to slowly wean themselves off of that. But there's always been this private public entity. Another thing that's been well known over the years is the church giving loans to members of the 12 and to their kids. And then forgiving the payment. I think there's a loophole in U.S. law that kind of allows this for churches that was exploited heavily by the church. So, oftentimes they'd get rich because they'd be able to take loans from the church and have those loans dismissed. And that's how they started acquiring wealth. But, one might ask the question, one asks about Ballard, to the other issue, you can get involved in other corporations way up high where they will trot out pictures of general authorities. And, the last time this was caught was like last decade when there were general authorities associated with some of these youth reform movements in the desert, where they take teenagers and put them down there, and they would have these quasi-official endorsements from the church, which always implies that the church endorses it. So I think he's in a long line of this shady bit, and that's just what we know about. I'm sure there's tons of this stuff that goes on that we just never hear about.
Yeah, you could be 100% right about that. I guess it's just maybe in the modern era, he's the most well compensated, maybe since the 90s.
I think probably directly on paper, yes.
Right.
And that's what I'm implying is there's all this shadow wealth that goes on around on this anyway. But yeah, they always it was Paul Dunn. If you remember, Paul Dunn in the early 80s got caught lying. He claimed to be a professional baseball player, and he claimed to be like kind of a war hero. And those things were, and anyway, there was a lawsuit, and part of the lawsuit was they exposed his salary as a member of the 70. And if I remember right, it was like $89,000 in like 1982. So at that time, the church was still claiming that the general authorities were uncompensated, and yet, here they were. And of course, the church does the things that all corporations do, which they compensate them without compensating them. They pay for all their meals, they pay for their cars, they pay for housing, they do all these things as perks or a total compensation package of the individuals without having any money exchange hand, which lowers tax liability of those guys. The church does all that sort of shady stuff. So yeah, I have no doubt, but this is just par for course.
Yeah, I mean, the church also compensates the general authorities using parsonage, which is for pastors, which means that is tax exempt as well.
Yep.
And a couple last articles here to round things out. Tim Ballard here, he's we discussed that his former company OUR, they released a statement saying that they did not have access to tithing records. Now he is actually under another investigation, another criminal investigation after a woman reported her sexual assault allegations to police. So he's already been the subject of a couple of civil lawsuits regarding sexual harassment, sexual assault. Now he's under criminal investigation. Things are getting much, much worse for Tim Ballard and his former, he's part of the Spear Fund now. That's his new organization after he left OUR in alleged disgrace. And Ken Krogh, the president of the Spear Fund, says the fact that a purported criminal complaint has been leaked to the media is even further evidence of the true intent behind this charade. So it's like, well, if he's been accused of something, then it's a charade. Nothing ever seems to Tim Ballard, he's kind of like Donald Trump. Nothing ever seems to stick to him for some reason.
It's like if you watch Fox News or listen to like, the conservative radio things, they have a lot of conspiratorial stuff selling on their selling gold and survival food and stuff like that. And because there's a mindset among a certain percentage of the population that the media is all lying. So if there's any stories that the media, then that's also evidence that they're being persecuted. And then they turn that into a big narrative of it's the liberals going after us. And so there's this weird kind of cultural milieu going on right now with about a third of our population in the United States. And of course, that goes for all the Western world. The same thing's happening in Europe and other places, where any kind of attempt to prove that they are not what they say they are, that they're fraudulent, feeds to this percentage of the population that they've already accepted that it's false. I've been researching the devil a lot lately, and one of the things that says in the scripture is, the devil is the father of all lies, and his chief lies say he doesn't exist. And it's like, what a mind trap, because you're stuck. There's no way out of that. And it's the same thing. If you believe the press is all fraudulent out to get you, then what you'll do is anybody the press attacks or anybody the press reports on, even if the justice system is going after them, then it'll feed into that narrative that these are all victims, and that's what he's playing on. It's unfortunately part of our larger culture right now.
Yeah. Now you can learn more about John Larsen on your YouTube channel that you just formed. What was that, about 6 months ago? What do you do on your personal YouTube channel, and what can we expect to see from you either in on your YouTube channel or through Mormon Stories or through what other projects are you working on, John? How can people see more of John Larsen?
Oh yeah, I often I don't record there very often. I've just kind of done some rants here and there, and frankly, I have a regular full-time job like all the rest of you poor bastards out there. So that's where I spend my majority of time. And then we have our small farm, and then I do the Mormon Stories about once a month. So that takes up a lot of my time. We're about to launch the website for the farm because this lives forever. I'll give you the URL. It's Dabbler Farm, DABBLER, like as in I dabble with things, dabblerfarm.org. If you go there right now today, you won't see anything. You can also go to my website. I've got it down there on the bottom of the screen, johnlarsen.org. And you can kind of see what I'm working on. That's my email address if you want to drop me a line. I read everything. Sometimes I don't get enough time to answer. So oh yeah, there we are on the Intentional Community website, and so there'll be more information. We're building a small we're building a small farm. We have 3 acres. We're really experimenting around with small space gardening and with the goal of trying to feed ourselves locally, either from our farm or from other farms we barter with or trade with or have association with, as much as possible as kind of an experiment. And we're also building the intergenerationally. So we're working at building small houses in particular for my children. And at some point we plan on expanding the farm to have others who I'm not necessarily blood related to. And I think really locally produced as much as possible, not engage the big corporate farm agriculture. Big ag has its problems, and also find a way to live where it's not. We're working on time frames larger than our own. The farm is intended to pass on to those who live here, and then pass on to those who live here, and pass on to those who live here, as opposed to investing all your money into a property and then liquidating it on death and then reinvesting. We're trying to break that paradigm. Anyway, in the next few months, if you go to dabblerfarm.org, you'll be able to read up more about it. That's my passion. That's what I work on. And then, of course, trying to help those who are leaving toxic, harmful organizations like the Mormon Church. It's terrible. You should all leave.
I guess that's your call to action at the end, John. Mm-hmm. Now, there's new episodes are live of the Mormon News Roundup are live every Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. on Sundays. You can join us on YouTube at that time. And we also have live episodes of the Mormon movie reviews every Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our episode tomorrow will be The Three Witnesses, that old 1963 classic. If you come on over to YouTube at that time, you can interact with your humble hosts. I want to give a shout out to Weird Alma on Bandcamp.com for this episode's music. And John, thanks so much for ruminating with me on what we call the great and spacious beehive. And remember,
no unhallowed hand can stop the podcast from progressing.
So long.
Yeah. When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan, Satan, Satan.